Our attorneys, Siad Patel, will be here to answer legal questions about the documents they launched and other crimes. Abdurrahman Mahdi, the first question is, will be the sustained hostility in Ogaden, the military conflict which now reaches a level in Ogaden and which is now already a half-century old conflict. We would like you to explain us from a prospect of an ONLF leader, from a prospect of one of the founders of Ogaden National Liberation Front and active leader. What is the geopolitical implication of Ogaden conflict in the Horn of Africa and also in the continent at large? Provided that next door Somalia there is a war of many names. In Kenya there's a lot of changes and things. What can you say about that?
Thank you very much. First of all, the Ogaden is a part of the wider Horn of Africa, region. As you know, the Somali Peninsula, what's called the Somali Peninsula, starting from Djibouti up to Mombasa in the Indian Ocean, on the other side of the Red Sea. That whole area is very strategic area for international trade, for oil, and those are major routes, major international routes for trade, oil, and also for other shipment routes. For example, it straddles, it controls the Horn of Africa. Whatever happens in the Horn of Africa will have impact in Africa and also in Asia, America, and also Europe, because it straddles the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. On the other side, goes up to the Cape of Africa. So major tankers pass through the Horn of African area. So the Ogaden, being part of that region, is a very strategic region, because what happens in the Ogaden also impacts in Somalia. The Somali Republic imploded because of the Ogaden, because of the war of 1977, because of the Cold War, because of now war on terror, what they call now is happening there. So the Ogaden is a very, very, very strategic part, jigsaw of the Horn of African strategic area. Besides, on the other side, Horn of Africa in general, and the Ogaden in particular, is full of carbon resources. It's one of the richest areas in Africa where gas and fossil fuels have been found. And on that also, major companies are also interested in exploiting that oil, so it has got also economic significance in the world. And on the other side, because of the current conflict, which is called war on terror, the Ogaden is a large, it's almost 1/3 of Ethiopia, as almost close to Somali Republic size. It's a very, very big territory. It's a hinterland, and whatever the presence of ONLF in that area has been very successful in keeping out any other unwanted people to come there and mount any other operations. So strategically, the ONLF has taken actually a big part in keeping the Ogaden, out of reach of many other groups who would have liked to use that area to do something that may not please many others. So the Horn of Africa and Ogaden is the hub. On the other side, the conflict that has been happening since 1945, as you remember, in 1935, Italy took over the Horn of Africa. And then, after the Second World War, Britain and the Allies captured back the Horn of Africa. Since that time, the has been a very, 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 very important jigsaw in the Cold War. As I said before in my speech, in Ogaden, what happened? Cubans came, Russians, the whole Warsaw Pact fought there, Americans were involved, even Israelis were involved. And now today, the same thing is again coming back again. In the Ogaden, the fight, what's happening in Somalia, the Somali Republic, is affecting the whole Horn of Africa. So the Ogaden is actually one of the centers of the conflict area of Horn of Africa. So it's very, very strategic and very significant. And besides, the Ogaden, as I said, current Ethiopia wanted is Ogaden, and the struggle that's happening in Ogaden is affecting the Ethiopian other nationalities in Ethiopia, Oromos, and other like Sidamas and even the Amharas who used to be the rulers. What's happening. So it's very strategic. What happens in Ogaden will also affect the future of all those nations. So are all struggling to retrieve their self-determination. So it's a very, very strategic area.
Thank you very much. Before I give a chance to audiences and the media members to ask you more questions, I would like to ask you a second question, and it's about youth uprising in the northern part of the continent. Has got implementations in Ethiopia also. We have seen Muslim uprising in Ethiopia. Do you think there is a chances for movements like ONLF and ONLF to mobilize the people?
Well, there's been what has been termed the Arab Spring in the northern Africa and some parts of the Middle East. That spring was also happening in Ethiopia. The people now in Ethiopia, specifically, there are several movements. There is the big Islamic movement. The Ethiopian government has tried to impose a new religion on Muslims in Ethiopia. Almost half of Ethiopians are Muslims. So what they did was, during the last few years, the regime, in order to increase its operation against all the people in Ethiopia, they instituted a new religion. They brought some people from Lebanon, and they brought a new something called Al-Habash religion, which is Islamic religion, a new sect which our people in the Horn of Africa don't know. So there's been a big, massive uprising, which across all nations and nationalities in nation Ethiopia, whether even Somalis, Oromos, and many other Muslims. So there's been a big uprising in Al-Sawa which is going on. At the same time, there are other movements. There's a big Oromo youth movement which is happening now, a very, very, very strong movement which has been shaking, the regime. There's also these new party, political opposition parties called Samayawi and also other UDJ parties, opposition parties. And apart from that, there are the liberation fronts which are fighting Ethiopia, the ONLF and the ONLF. So the whole Ethiopia is now actually a cooking pot. That's what we are saying. Unless there is a peaceful solution to the problem, it will become a very, very big African problem soon. Because what information we are getting now, the situation at Sawa is very, 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 very shaky. Even now, they have banned even media people to leave the OAU. They cannot even report from outside the OAU building. So it's a kind of what we can say. It's just pre-Mogadishu in 1991. What was happening, or Lebanon in the latest. So what we are very much afraid of, there will be a very, 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 very big conflagration instead of an orderly change, which would be very good for all people involved. But from what's happening now, because if you put pressure on a bottle, it cooks, it cracks, and nobody can put them together like Dumpty. So unless the international community intervenes now, Ethiopia will become a very, very, very another Somalia in the next few years. That's what is being predicted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahdi. I want to give chances to audiences. Anyone who have question for Mr. Mahdi, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Kafi.
Thank you very much, and and I would like to ask the Secretary for ONLF regarding the negotiations which will be held in Nairobi. I'm not sure when it will be, but what if, like the other negotiations which stalled last year, what if the Ethiopian government assigned the generals to negotiate with the ONLF? What are your plans for that? Because we know the militaries, the generals are only specialized in engagement in terms of wars, but they are not specialized in negotiations, which is really, I think, the official negotiations held in Kenya. So what is your plan if the negotiation tables come in generals from the Ethiopian government?
Well, first of all, negotiations, when you are negotiating with a third party, you cannot dictate who they bring. You cannot say don't bring the generals or bring such a person. So it's their sovereignty to bring whoever the thing is from their side. But in general, it's not a good policy to bring those who are fighting to negotiate. The generals know only war, so it has been better to have diplomats, and that's what we hope. But for us, our position is we will negotiate with anybody who's ready to talk in peace. It doesn't matter who comes there. For us, the main thing is we are ready to negotiate if they are ready to negotiate. What will decide our position is what is the terms of the negotiations. What are the terms of the negotiations? It's not who is there or what they suppose. Because when you want peace, you cannot say exactly, I don't want this person, I want that person. You have to accept whoever they bring. But what you can refuse or you can accept is the agenda and the core issues which are discussing. That will be our main concern. We don't care who they bring. But it will be good for them to bring seasoned diplomats.
Okay, Mr. Jibril, can please come forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, I would like to ask a little bit diplomatic question, which means in Ethiopia as an history, we never get a peace. Actually, the world will think Ethiopia is a democratic country, while the real citizens, the native home people, they don't see that democratic and equality in Ethiopia. The eyes of the world, the ears of the world are dipped by the information given to the world. And now there is a freedom fighters like ONLF and the ONLF and the Islamic movement, let us say also whatever we can say, a lot of fights in Ethiopia in a different direction, whereby especially ONLF and the ONLF wanted the self-determination, and they are also given as a terrorist because of blocking this idea, and also giving more deepness to the world. How the ONLF are they convincing the world that the rights of the people are violated, and that the self-determination people are asking for are justice, and that they need it really, and that they deserve it? How are they going to convince this?
First of all, freedom fighters are always called terrorists. So for us, if they call us terrorists, it's a badge of actually honor. If you look back to history, Washington was called a terrorist by the British when he was fighting trying to liberate America. Cromwell, who wanted to get Magna Carta for the British people, was called a terrorist. Nelson Mandela was called terrorist. Mao Zedong was called terrorist. So all freedom fighters are always called terrorists. So if they call you terrorists, it means that they acknowledge you as a freedom fighter. So don't be very much angry about terrorists. A terrorist is a person who deliberately kills civilians. And the Ethiopian government is killing civilians deliberately. It's a state terrorism, it's the worst terrorism in the world. So for us, they are the terrorists. We don't consider ourselves the terrorists. We have no policy to hurt, because of political gains, civilians. ONLF and ONLF has never engaged in any act that's against the civilian population, or even Ethiopians. We have never done, let alone other parts of the world. So that's why the world doesn't recognize us as terrorists. That's why I can come here, South Africa, I can go to London, I can go to Washington, because it's not part of our principle is against terrorism. For us, terrorism is not a religion, it's not something, it's the policy of using politics to hurt civilians, to gain political ends. And those who engage in that, those are called terrorists. The Ethiopian government is holding hostage more than 50 million Ethiopians, or more than 50 million Ethiopians, more than 10 million Ogadenis, who are they called terrorists. So they are the terrorists actually on our side. As for democracy in Ethiopia, if I take the Oromo people are almost half of Ethiopia. Oromo people are more than 50 million. And they don't rule, they should have ruled Ethiopia. They should have been the rulers of Ethiopia. They are the majority. What do they have? They are allowed only to have a name and a nominal president who the ruling regime elects, and to have the side prime minister. And then they are about 10% of the Ethiopian ruling elite is allowed as Oromo, especially selected Oromo. So there is no democracy in Ethiopia. That's absolutely a sham. democracy in Ethiopia is just like saying, North Korea is democracy. Actually, they're not even worse than North Korea, because the North Korea doesn't have their own woman. They may have one leader, but actually what's happening in Ethiopia is much worse than any pariah state in the world. So, but unfortunately, for certain countries, democracy means those who are with them. If you are not with them, or even if you are not against them, but they don't need you at that time, you are not Democrat. So democracy now has become a catchphrase for those who want to deny the rights of people. For us, democracy, our cultures, for example, in the Ogaden, our culture is very democratic. Our culture, every person in the Ogaden have a say in their livelihood. They have got, they have got the shift, their meetings, where everybody decides. Even in our old culture, we didn't even want, even parliament will not represent us. The people have got direct rule in Ogaden. The same with the Oromo people. They have got the Ghana system, which means the people have got direct rule. We are the most democratic nations in North Africa than any other part of the world. We never allowed kings to rule us. You can see our level of democracy. We never accept even kings to rule us. You cannot find king in Ogaden or in Oromo, because that's the Cushitic culture. The Cushitic culture is one of the most democratic cultures in the world. We even refuse to have kings because we don't want one person to dominate us. So democracy actually is actually the people is embedded in our culture. But in Ethiopia, these northerners, they don't have any sense of democracy. They have always been ruled by strongmen. Menelik, this towards this, you'll always see, always strongmen. Oppression, taking other people's lands, doing such things. So that has been the culture.
Thank you very much.